let's take some questions from the audience. Please repeat the question. I will, absolutely. Anybody have any questions for the panel? Yes, sir. The two questions, I think they're great. The first one is about MOOCs and bringing that into more of a corporate world, not making it quite as open, but making it a little bit more moderated or specific to that audience. And how does that change what the MOOC is? Or how does that have an impact on the corporate learner as opposed to a public learner who's accessing that MOOC? And then the second question, one more time very briefly.
Was where do you think we are in
with the context?
Traditional content versus...
And I might want to take that one because I'm a big scenario-based learning fan, but does anybody want to take the first question on MOOCs and in the corporate environment?
I think Doug does.
Yeah, I think Doug does.
Well, no, I mean, what I would say is this, is that we work traditionally with universities specifically rather than look more broadly. We have, tuition reimbursement programs that allow our students to go out and secure learning wherever they want. Until I think the MOOC is recognized as a collective and can provide, a diploma-based results. That's unfortunately what corporations are looking for right now. So, and I think it's moving in that direction, but right now it's still, if you will, singularly focused on, I'll take this course here and that course there, but I can't string it together into a packaged diploma that would be accepted by a corporate society, a corporate organization right now. You guys?
Yeah, I'll just add a little. I mean, I think fundamentally one of the problems that we're facing, and I'm talking to just corporations in general, and I had this especially at a previous company I worked with, was we're not getting what we need from the public system. So when people are coming to work for us, we're having to up-level a lot of what I would think are basic skills that you need to work in a professional environment. Communication, critical thinking, software acumen, financial acumen, that kind of stuff. The public system is failing corporate America on that badly. And so we spend a lot of time from a corporate perspective just bringing up our skill set so that we can have an effective workforce. I think from the MOOC standpoint, to my dying day, I'll swear there's nothing better than instructor-led training from a corporate environment. There's nothing better than being in there with the expert and wherever you're at, in the context of the work you do or in the classroom, learning from peers, learning from others. For sales training, I think, and I've spent most of my career in sales training, never has there been better sales training than when salespeople from the field, along with professional facilitators, come into a room with other people and teach them how to sell. That's just how it is. The problem with that is what I call the authenticity spectrum is it doesn't scale well. And I would argue, and a lot of companies are going to say, well, it doesn't scale financially, so we've got to go to e-learning or MOOCs or virtual learning or all these other things because we can't afford to bring everyone to a building anymore. And my argument is you can't afford to bring your sales force to a building and teach them how to do their job. That's a fundamental problem to begin with. But we're using that as an excuse. And so I don't do MOOCs, and I'm not going to do something like that in a corporate environment I'm in, but I think it's a reactionary, and this is my opinion, I just think it's a reactionary issue, and it's a reaction to this idea that I can just teach a lot of people some stuff, and they'll just sit and listen to a passive video and go, engage in a forum discussion and get it and move on, and I just don't think that's gonna work.
Yeah, I think we're still in a corporation, there's still, maybe we'll change, but we still have to have control. To some degree, it just has to be a little bit more, you have to decide what it is you're trying to teach as a corporation and how you're going to do it. I just don't think we're there for it to be too freeform yet.
Right, and that even speaks to more of a social or peer-to-peer kind of learning. It's much harder to moderate that and have some control over the messaging that you're putting out there. So.
And it's different than the wrong answer on the internet, and you can keep looking and see what you think of the credibility of the person who put it out there. Here, it's your business, and so I think we're still striving for a more controlled environment, training-wise, anyway.
Does anybody want to take the question about the context, and it's not quite there, in the materials that we're putting out. Anybody want to address that one?
The only thing I would say is, I'll go back to the instructional design, and I'll frankly, there was the Department of Defense study a few years ago, and it's on the internet, and their research was e-learning was just as effective as classroom learning when e-learning was done well. And so I think the problem now is e-learning just isn't being done well, especially in the corporate space. There's no reason why you can't be effective with different types of, or what I call the different channels of learning. It just takes the skills to be able to do that. And too many learning organizations have people who don't know anything about learning running them, and too many people working there that can't design well. And I think part of the problem with that has been this rapid proliferation over the last few years of these so-called rapid authoring tools, which really just helps you regurgitate bullets on a PowerPoint slide. And I don't want to pay someone $80,000 a year to sit in a cube and build PowerPoint slides. I'm not going to bother, because it's not going to do any good. And I think the problem is not understanding that we need the right skill sets to do the right resolution, if you will, of quality for what it is. Like to your point about scenarios, you need someone that really knows how to do that. If someone's going to design a game, they should play games and understand them and know what mechanics are important. So I think that's a struggle, because a lot of learning departments are under-resourced, and they get one person they label an instructional designer, and they get them articulate, and they say go. And they're going to just put out a lot of crap.
Well, and I'll give this room an example of a scenario-based learning piece. Let's say the training intervention is that the subject matter expert comes to you and says, we have a new policy on what to do when we have a fire in the building, or we need, no one's following the rules and we have fire alarms, and I need to put the policy in there, and they need to read the policy, and it's going to take like 45 minutes, and then there needs to be a quiz, and they can't skip any of the slides, and they have to hear all the audio, and that's the way it's going to be, so everybody knows the policy. And I could argue that I could teach that same thing in 5 minutes, and it would start this way. Imagine in this room right now that the fire alarm went off. What would you do? That's 2 sentences. And think about what that did to you. What went through your mind as soon as you heard that? You actually put yourself in that context. It's almost involuntary. You have to think about, what would I do? Do I know what I should do? Should I run for the stairs? Do I know where the exits are? Is there a floor captain? Do we have that kind of thing? And now there are lots of questions going through my mind, and it's an emotional response. Adult learners respond very well, or create memories when they're centered around emotion. And I think that's really missing. Instead of just stating the policy or like regurgitating the bullets, why not create that context when it's so easy to do? It doesn't have to be an elaborate story. It doesn't have to be a winking and blinking avatar on the screen to suggest that to me. I can easily state that and put it out there and make someone motivated to seek out, understand, and apply that policy, rather than just expecting them to learn it and then quiz them on it. Did you have something to add to that?
Well, I was going to add that, that's true, and that's the way it should be, but the problem is that enter the attorney that says, well, listen, we've got a policy. If you don't state the whole policy, they wouldn't be sued. So that's exactly why we have what we have, which is this is the approach. It's going to take 45 minutes to go through this. It's locked down. I'll tell you when you can advance a slide. I'm going to test you on it. That's how most of our compliance training is. Compliance training, you just got to hold your nose and take it, because we are not, as instructional designers, going to ever influence it. It's going to be the way it is because it's directed and managed by attorneys.
When can we get the lawyers out of it?
That's next month's meeting.
One more question.
Yes, sir. Any other questions? All right, so let me try to repeat the question, if I may, just to make sure that everybody can hear it. If I understand the question, is if I've got something to teach, in your case, a piece of software, an application that you're trying to teach someone how to use, or whatever the situation is, and you want to make sure that people are compliant with whatever the information is that you're trying to put out there, or how do we know that they've learned it? How do we know they're competent or they've absorbed it? What can you do to make sure that that's happening? How can you put something out there that you're sure is actually going to be instructional and meet the compliance needs or meet the learning needs? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Well, not only that, but how well does the industry allow you to go out and find a technology to enable you to do that more effectively, where you've got certain standards you have to meet to do that? You know, the law said, the lawyer's telling you, you got to make sure they did it. But you can't ensure that that person paid attention to the screen, even though you ask questions and do that. Did they follow the protocol 100%?
Okay, so in other words, if the lawyers are telling us what the policy is that we have to be compliant with, how do we as instructors or people making technology-based learning interventions, how do we make sure that that's actually having the impact that we think it's going to have?
Right, and can you bring that, and can you bring other resources in there to help that solve that problem?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there are a couple of things here. One is it all comes back to evidence, okay? So we start with a standard compliance course we have to take, no choice, we have to take it. If you build a supplement, let's say a situational supplement that might be a game or some other type of interaction that allows you to really study the aspect of what you're trying to convey, if you can begin to provide support that says, look, there's evidence here that says those that play this game 3 times are better at getting down the stairs for the fire than those that watch the PowerPoint. And you have enough evidence you bring forward to say, I have a funny feeling we need to make a shift here. But again, in corporate America, you don't make immediate shifts. So as you build the evidence that says, this is how it should, this is more effective, our performance is improved. Once you start talking performance in an organization, people listen. And so it's over time, and I would view it as give them options. Provide the requirement as the base level, but provide an alternate. And if that alternate can prove effective, then I think you can see the change.
I'll just add, I think the LMS data at Enron said everyone went through compliance and passed it. So you're going to have a point where culture and trust comes into play. And yeah, you can get the checklist done and the sexual harassment courses, but humans make errors. We're faulty by default, and we're going to do things that we probably shouldn't do. There's going to be a certain percentage of that happens. But I think a lot of it, that is the foundation of that, is the company's culture, the leadership, the values they promote, and the principles that frame kind of everything about them, right? The other thing on the innovation part, I'll just add, I spend probably 5 hours a week hearing from vendors and what they're offering and looking, because we're always looking for efficiencies. And I'll always say, you always buy, you never build. I had a chief technology officer at Yahoo tell me, I'm not going to build it, I'm going to buy it. It's cheaper in the long run. So part of our job needs to be to listen to people, what they're doing, get out there, go to the understand what people are innovating software-wise and platform-wise, so that we can figure out how we might leverage that and integrate it and use it, for our advantage.
Great, so the question is, in regard to mobile learning behaviors, how people use devices, how they prefer to consume the content on a mobile device. Is there somebody in an organization dedicated to discovering that in that audience and standardizing for that audience how the content is formatted and presented? Is that essentially the question?
Yeah, I will say for Thermo Fishers, there's not, and I think it is a huge point you're making, and we should. I left IBM 5 years ago, and they probably do have somebody doing that because it's a very controlled environment. But I think, it's kind of back to the point I was making at the beginning. We're all about, let's have iPads or notebooks, and let's deploy the device, and we don't have an integrated strategy of getting the most out of the device, to me. We're forgetting what's going to really bring the benefit back to the business on it. And I think that kind of analytics would be very useful. Good point. Are you trying to get a job?
I think we actually have that, but it's emanating right now from marketing. So, and I think any learning group in a company where there is a marketing group should be closely aligned with marketing and what they're doing. But there's only 7 behaviors that a consumer engages in when they're with the mobile device. Saying only, but fully understanding what they do with these things, and I don't think device really matters at the end of the day. But I'll tell you what, the train has left the station, so if you're not on board, you're already behind, because over 1 billion people are coming online next year without a PC. They're coming online and they're doing searches on mobile devices. And most of the searches out there now are occurring from mobile devices. So if you're in a learning organization and you don't have a mobile strategy yet, you're already behind the curve. Whether or not you're delivering mobile now, you should be thinking mobile first with your content now, because the world of tetheredness is over. So I think your comment about that is there should be probably a chief mobile behavior officer or something at every company. But right now, we find it in marketing because they are out there with we have an app, we have a consumer app, and we can get a lot of data about how people are using our consumer app. And when you start building learning apps, you're going to be able to track every tap they do, and you'll understand what they're doing, and you'll be able to further feed that into your behavioral analysis, which you will need to do to design effective experiences for them.
So I think the role is a data scientist is what the role is. And it is, and right now you're right, it is resident in marketing in areas of human factors where you can evaluate what people do, how they behave with a product, how they behave with an application, and people make improvements based upon that. It has not transitioned to learning yet. It needs to, because we are still stroke counting how many were in the room, did they finish the course, what were the final grades. You need to get to an area where you're beginning to focus about performance. But the data piece of that is something that most of these companies are just getting started with. I mean, we just, social media, for example, is relatively new for us. So we've established that a couple people within the organization to do that. They're out there doing their thing, but the fact is, are they really interpreting the data coming back in? Because the data, there's gold in the data. And until we begin to really get into that and understand it, you'll never know. One quick example at Philips was we started looking at Amazon and what we were seeing in terms of customer reactions to some of the products. So the heart starts defibrillator, right? We would learn from that someone had passed out in a room, and all they were doing was rating it as a great product because it brought so-and-so back to life. And we had 70 different people we identified from the Amazon that the product had brought them back to life. I mean, that kind of data we would have missed had we not been doing that. So that role, that data scientist role, is going to be critically important as we move into the future. It's big data is what it is, and that's where we're going to be. Yeah.
Do we have time for any more questions? One more from the back row.
Well, it'll be short, I think. What are the 7 mobile mindsets?
I want to know that.
Okay, the question is, what are the 7 mobile mindsets? Let's see how
hurry,
good our
look it
memory
up.
is.
Someone search it.
got random
Search it. It's out
Let's
there.
see who can search it most quickly on their mobile device.
Does anyone have it?
I love it. Okay, perfect.
Well, let's thank the panel and the moderator.